Welcome, students. In today's lecture, we are going to talk about the global environment. We will discuss the different types of businesses and we are going to discuss how an organization can get involved in the international market. We will talk about some key features of different entry strategies an organization can choose from in entering the international market. We will also shed light on what are the key challenges an organization faces in the international business. And towards the end of the chapter, we are going to talk about a very famous cultural framework model given by Geert Hofstede. And this model helps us to understand the general cultural value of different nations. So let's get started. What is business? Business is the act that results from trading between any two given entities for the value of goods, products, or service. That means in business, there is a willing buyer and a willing seller who wants to sell and who wants to buy, with the medium of exchange being the currency. That means both the buyer and the seller must be willing to exchange goods and currency, and that is what business is about. When a businessman decides to do business, his geographical limitation helps him to decide how big or small his scale of production is going to be, and that is dependent on whether he is again going to do business in the local market, that means in his own country, or he is going to do business in the international market. Now, a business is affected by globalization, and there is no doubt about it. Even if an organization is not involved in international business, that business is somehow affected by globalization. So, globalization has been fueled by the advancement of technology and internet, so more international transactions are taking place. The local business are something that remains within the geographic boundaries, but the international business is when an organization gets more and more globalized. So let's learn some more detail about the different types of businesses that an organization can get into when in the process of the first phase of business an organization can choose to do is domestic business. Domestic business is a business organization where the businessmen or two parties, the buyer and the seller, they are residing in the same geographic border of a country. So, a domestic business is a commercial exchange that is done within a country's geographic boundary. So, a domestic business is sometimes referred to as internal business, and usually it involves a manufacturer and a customer who lives in the same country. This means that their business transactions are governed by their home country's laws, business practices, and culture. Some of the example of such businesses would be J&J bookstore that you have near your Bragg campus, Ghorwa Birani house from where you sometimes probably buy your lunch, Dhaka Regency hotels and resorts, Persona beauty parlor, and Daily Star newspaper. Because the buyer and the seller of these organizations are within Bangladesh, so they are called domestic business. International business, on the other hand, is a form of business in which the producer and consumers are both based in more than one country. So, an international business is not governed by only the local law of the businessman's home country, but they are governed by laws or business practices that falls within the global context that fits the global market. So it will have some international agreement for how to conduct business in the global market as well. So, international business involves trade between producers and customers for more than one nation. And the example would be uh, Pran Arifil Group, Square Group, Hotel Radisson, Kinokuniya, which is a bookstore, the Financial Times, Sport Clips, which is a saloon for men and it is an international chain, the Manhattan Fish Market. So, these are all international businesses. So, first we move on to the differences. Let's see some of the similarities. In both the domestic and international business, there is a willing buyer and a willing seller who wants to take part in the exchange or transaction. In order to move with the transaction, both the parties must agree to do business. And in both international and domestic business, the transaction is completed once the parties are in agreement and about which currency should be used for completing the transaction. When we are going to discuss about the differences, the first difference is about defining the market. Domestic markets are based within a country's geographic boundaries, whereas international companies don't have any limitation as such. Their business functions can exceed beyond the geographical borders of more than one country. The scale of production and marketing of domestic businesses are comparatively small in comparison to international market, because in international market they're operating in more than one country. Their scale of production and marketing is larger than domestic business, because in domestic business you are just catering to one group of consumer in your own country, but as an international company you are operating in many countries at a time, and you are catering to many different types of consumers based in different countries. So the scale of production and marketing has to be big. Now domestic businesses, when they tries to maintain quality, they can maintain a local standard. So within the geographic boundaries, whatever is acceptable by the local consumer, the quality can be defined by that. But in international market, it has to maintain some global standard. Otherwise, consumers residing in very different countries, for example, consumers of Japan, they are very difficult to convince. They're one of the toughest group of consumers that a marketer has to deal with. So they will not be convinced with your local standards of product. You have to give them something that fits globally, that has a very international standard. Now, about the fourth point, which is the cost of investment of setting up the business. For domestic business, it is comparatively less because you are setting business only within your geographic location. But for international business, the cost of investment is quite large because in this case, you are opening up subsidiaries in more than one nation. That means if in domestic market you had only one company, one factory, and one office. Now, for international business, you are operating, for example, in three countries, you will have three different production facilities and three different offices to manage those business. So, the cost of investment is obviously way more. Moreover, whenever you are crossing border, there are added cost of transportation, there are added cost of expatriates. That means employees that you are sending to different location to work for you. You have to pay them more than your local employees. So that all these increases cost. Okay. So and the last one about managing resources. Now, within the domestic boundary, when you are managing your resources, you are having supplies from your suppliers who are locally based. At the same time, you are managing your business within the local boundary, following the local rules and norms of business practices. So, managing the resources are quite easy because you have a better understanding of how it works in your home country. You have a better understanding of what consumers expect and what they want. At the same time, you also have better understanding of what your employees' expectations are from you, how they will react to salary cut or delay in salary or overtime. So you know how to respond to their need, how to empathize with their feelings. So managing resources is quite easy in a domestic market. Whereas in international market, it is quite difficult because you have to know different kinds of rules and regulation operating in different countries. At the same time, different consumer group will also have different kinds of expectations. So as a single management, you are now going to cater to different market who have different kind of expectation from you. So, for example, you have consumers who are residing in China. At the same time, you have consumers who are residing in UK. So imagine the kind of cultural differences consumers are going to have. Not only that, if you have two different subsidiaries, one in UK and one in China, then you have different kinds of employees that you have to manage. So the work gets very difficult. Also, the level of development of different countries are at different stages. For example, if you want to set up business in many rural areas of Africa, it may be very difficult at the beginning because the infrastructure is not properly developed, as it is in some developed nation like UK or USA. But then you cannot really enter into such highly competitive market because the competition is very high, the government rules and regulations are quite stringent, and you are also very new to those culture.